Zig Ziglar said, "Money isn't the most important thing in life, but it's reasonably close to oxygen on the gotta have it scale." And when you think about it, that's, we can all nod and agree with that. It's not surprising, is it? I mean, apart from the fact that you and I need at least some of it in order to live, that's the way our society works. Money can do all sorts of things for people. Money can buy a great holiday experience and gorgeous home decor. Money can buy you some really cool clothes. It can buy you a night off cooking. That's pretty wonderful. Money can buy reputation and status. I saw some people smiling broadly at the night off cooking one. Yes, you can use your money for that. Money can buy reputations and status. Money can employ people. It can alleviate people's distress. Money is actually very, very powerful. It changes things. And money has what another author called J. Johns wrote, godlike powers. Money has godlike, little g, godlike powers. And when I was reading that, I thought, well, I guess that's why we love it so much. We worry about it so much. That's why it's easy to make money the main thing. And probably the fact that money has godlike powers is the reason that we need to be more careful about money and our relationship with money than just about anything else. So this week we're starting a series looking at money. Now let me say something right up front. You might hear the phrase, I think Josh used it, stewardship series, and think, oh, here we go, fundraising drive. You hear the minister talk, say something like I've just said, we're going to be talking about money, and in your head you go, okay, it's equivalent of telethon time. We're going to start figuring out what our pledges are, and we'll be phoning them in before you know it. But I want to tell you something, that here at LBC, when it is fundraising time, we will call it that, like we did with the Cover the Gap offering last year. And I want to say that this is not that. This is simply an opportunity for us to think about what we think about and what we do with money, and to think about what being Jesus followers means about what we think about and what we do with money. That's what we're doing in this series. Next Sunday, Dave Kendall, who's from Christians Against Poverty, CAP, he'll be coming and speaking, so I encourage you to get along. That'll be a great one to bring friends and family to. A number of people from LBC have been to one of the CAP courses to look at basic budgeting, and in the not too distant future, Josh will be running a basic budgeting course here for us as a church family and for our community. In your little sermon notes, which I hope you all got, has everybody got one of those? Wonderful. If not, make sure you can grab one on the way out. There we put the reference page to the CAP Facebook page there, so I'd suggest you check that out before next week. But this week, I'm going to start us on the conversation about beliefs that shape our relationship with money. That's the focus of this series. And actually, to help you, if you've got your sermon notes out there again, they look a little like this. If you haven't got one and you'd really love one, put your hand up now. I'm sure I can dob someone in. Oh, look. Can we have some of those handed around? Keep your hand up till Peter has got one for you, because there's space on the front for you to be writing. But on the back, what we have printed for your reference is just a simple outline of what it is at LBC we believe about money. So it's our theology of money, if you like. It's healthy biblical money management. That's written on the back of the document there. Great for you to take this, use it in your homes and in your life groups. There's a few down the front here too. Thank you. That's great. Okay, so what we're going to do today is look at one of the passages that's on the back of this document. It's from 1 Timothy chapter 6. Okay, everybody's set now? We'll get into that. Thank you, everyone. 1 Timothy chapter 6. So Paul is writing this letter, and Paul is an older guy writing to a younger pastor called Timothy, and he's at the end of this letter, 1 Timothy, and in this last chapter he gives Timothy, this young pastor, a whole pile of instructions about how to teach and deal with the wealthy people that Timothy has in his church. Now, I know we are not the people that Timothy was pastoring, and so therefore not the people that Paul was telling Timothy to talk to. But I got to tell you, it doesn't take much work to see how this passage applies to us. Sometimes when us pastors sit in our offices and we look at Bible passages and we look at them and we think, oh my goodness, what the heck are we going to do with this? How do we take the beauty and the information and the truth out of this and bring it into the context that we are living in today? But I got to say, this was a no-brainer. It was not difficult at all to recontextualize this passage. And I was going to tell you why. You'll have to excuse me, though, because I'm going to do it with a generalisation. As largely white, middle-class people living in Australia in the 21st century, we have enough to ensure a significantly high quality of life. Significantly higher than the vast majority of the world's population. We are wealthy people, like Paul was telling Timothy to talk to back then. Now, I've got to say, sitting here, that's kind of hard to appreciate or come to grips with for many of us, I think. Because what we have just seems normal, doesn't it? It just seems normal. And in fact, if we do any comparing, have you noticed? Well, at least I do it this way. I don't compare myself to people who have less than. I'll do comparing to the people that I know or I see on telly who've got more than me. So we do our comparing in that direction. But I guess I wanted to start by saying it's simply a fact that we are wealthy people compared with most of the rest of the world's population. Okay, now I hope that you're going to get some time in this week to read the whole of 1 Timothy chapter 6, but I just want to pick out a few verses that are kind of a little cameo of the message. So let's have a read of those. Paul is saying to Pastor Timothy, "Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, so that they may experience true life." Now, in these verses, there are a few really simple statements about us and money that I think suggest some really simple actions that will help all of us get into good relationship with money. But before we get to what is clear and simple in these verses, I just want to say something. And that is that when I read these verses and the whole chapter, it struck me how complicated money is. We're going to get to the simple and clear, but it really struck me how complicated it is. Do you know the story of the rich young man that Jesus told to sell all of his possessions? He told this guy literally to sell everything he owned and then to take the money and use the money to give to people who didn't have enough. That's in Mark chapter 10, that story. So my question is, how come Jesus told that rich guy to quite literally give everything away? But in this letter and in other stories in the Bible, that's actually not the message that is communicated. The message communicated in this story and other places in the Bible is more along the lines of, do good things with your extra to your basic needs money, which is quite different to saying give it all away. Live on it, save it, invest it, make more of it, keep it, give it away, give some of it away, give all of it away. There's no one size fits all. And there's an obvious reason to that, I guess. And that's because it's actually about our money relationship, not about money itself or the amount of it that we have. And if it's about our money relationship, then that's as varied as we are. So what Jesus might tell me might be different to what he might tell you in the circumstances, depending on my relationship, your relationship with money. And it was not a good relationship with money. That was the issue for that rich young guy. So Jesus told him he should sell it all up, but he couldn't do it. And I don't think that was because he had a lot of money, although he did. I reckon if Jesus had seen that guy when he was a poor young man or a less rich young man, it would have been the same thing going on for him. I don't think it was the amount of money that young man had that was the issue. It was that he was in love with his money. And he was very afraid of giving any of it away. He wanted to keep it and keep on making it without sharing any of it. So it wasn't the amount that he had, but it was his relationship with that amount. Now, there's no doubt, a group this size, some of us are probably like that rich young man. Of course, not that we started out like that. This is Paul tells Timothy earlier in this chapter, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world. But somehow along the way, we can become people who are not content with having enough. And we start craving more and more and more than enough. And we are very protective of the more than enough that we have. Like, the old saving for a rainy day. I better keep that just in case. Or what if I need this or want that or need to go to the other place? So we become very protective of the more than enough that we have. And that's how it went for the rich young man. He genuinely wanted to follow Jesus. But when he heard what it was going to cost him, his face fell and he walked away sad. Paul describes the relationship that man had with his money like this in 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. So some of us struggle like that rich young man. But I think there's probably many of us in this place who are like the rich young man in that we have much more than we need for sustaining life. But our desire to follow Jesus is strong. And we actually want to follow Jesus more than we want to amass and protect our wealth. I see that in many of you. And I guess that's the space I want to talk into this morning. Because in fact, it turns out it's actually not easy to be wealthy and follow Jesus well. You can do it, it's not impossible, but it's not easy. And we need some good advice. So Paul suggests 3 things that we're going to talk about how to help us get our money relationship right. Now, like I've said to you, he wrote these things to wealthy people, and I've argued that in fact that's all of us, just because of where we live and who we are at this time in history in the world. But I want to say now that I know that some in our family and certainly some in our community live life quite tough financially. So for some of you, there's unemployment or insufficient employment. For some, there's unmanageable debt. For some, there's very heavy health costs that go with caring for family members, and there's all sorts of other things as well. So let's just say this. However you identify yourself today, whether if we drew a line out here, you would put yourself at the wealthiest end of wealthy Australians, or whether you would put yourself at the poorer end of wealthy Australians, or somewhere in between. There's something in these few verses for all of us, whatever dollar figure you might ascribe to your wealth. 3 things we can do to get our money relationship right, whatever the dollar value that indicates our wealth. And all 3 are up on the screen for you now. The first is put your money where your trust is. Use your money power for good. And this one, repeat after me, God's children are not tight-fisted. Put your money where your trust is. Now, I could have called these points quite different things, but the first one particularly I could have called trust God, not money. But I really worry that that's the sort of phrase that we hear often in church, too often really, for it to have an impact on us anymore. Trust God, not money. It could be up there with common quips like, you can't take it with you, you've heard that one already this morning, and money can't buy you happiness or love or meaning or whatever it is you want to fill in there. But the trouble with those things is when I hear it, I don't know if you're the same, money can't buy you happiness, but I tell you what, it can sure ease the pain, can't it? And then if I go that far in my head, I get to this next one. Whoever said money can't buy happiness just doesn't know where to shop. And then the slope is slippery. So I'm deliberately trying to use language this morning that for those of us who've been in church a while, or for those of us who think we know church language, think about it in a slightly different way. So think about it like this. Not only do we both enter and leave the world without it, even in this life, money comes and goes. You can't take it with you, but you can't even rely on it while you are here. You can't trust money because money is fickle. It's fickle in its coming and its going. And you know what? Even when it's with us in potfuls, it's not up to the pressure we put on it. It's not up to the pressure of giving us meaning and satisfaction and security. It's not up to that pressure. But I want to argue that God, on the other hand, is not fickle. Okay, he was with us at our beginning. He will be with us at our end, and as a new chapter starts, he is with us in every moment in between all of those times, and he will be with us forever. And the thing with God is, unlike money, he is up to our need for security and meaning and satisfaction. I mean, God loves us so much that he gave up his own wealth, his own privilege to be one of us and to be for us in the extraordinary life and death and life again of Jesus. God can be trusted. I'm not going to do a sermon on that now. We had, I think, a great series, a good sermon on that back on Father's Day. And I want to really suggest to you, if you're thinking, well, can God be trusted? Go back and go onto our website. You can listen or you can watch the video. There's 2 links there for you to have a look at. God can be trusted. God can be trusted, so put your money there. And you might be saying, that's okay, you're still sounding a bit churchy and lovely language, trust God, put your money there. How do we do that? How do we put our money where our trust is? Well, I think we do it like this. When we are working out a plan with what to do with our money, well, actually, that's probably the first thing. Work out a plan with what to do with our money as distinct from, oh, I'm spending my money and now my credit card doesn't work anymore. So that's the first thing. Work out a plan for what to do with your money. But when you are doing your budgeting or however that works in your household, do it like this. Make the main thing and start first of all, the first pot, the first box. Put into that box the I trust you, God, thank you money. If you are regularly committed to a local church, part of that will be your offering to the local church. It might be for you money for sponsoring children, for helping people who are poor in other ways, for blessing the community with good things. But whatever it is, figure out that thank you, God, money first, and put that outside first. Then you go on to the here is what I will repay on my debts, here is what I will save, and this is what I will live on. That doesn't come naturally to me. I don't know about you. I will comfortably start with this is what I will live on, and God and my debts and saving can fight themselves silly over what is left at the end of that. But I reckon the way to put your money where your trust is to start with the God bit. Go to the debts, go to the saving. This is what I've got to live on. Give it a whirl. Okay, the second thing, use your money power for good. Don't use money to give yourself superior standing. And I don't know any of you here that would do that, I think, in a knowing or malicious way, but we can do it even in small ways. Just feel a little bit better about ourselves because of the house we've got or the car that we drive. The schools we can afford to send our kids to or our holidays. Don't use money to give yourself superior standing in your family or community. Use your money power for good. Like very wealthy followers of Jesus have throughout human history. People who've used their money to start something good, to start things that make life better for people, and especially to start things that make life better for people who need money power because they don't have much themselves. Schools and hospitals and hospices and refuges and orphanages and affordable housing, affordable holidays, safe playgrounds, and even creative endeavours. Don't count them out. All the stories of when poor artists have been, get a benefactor or a sponsor and they create beautiful works of art which bless our souls, the souls of many, many people for many, many years. In his commentary on this letter that Paul wrote, Tom Wright says, often a project that is enormously worthwhile in itself needs some initial start-up money, and a gift from a wise patron can set something in motion which can then run itself and do good for many people for many years. Now, I imagine, I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think there might be some people sitting here today going, yeah, okay, well, that's all very well, but shouldn't the things we spend money on as Jesus followers, individually and as a church, go directly to endeavours where people are going to hear the gospel preached? And you have to think, well, what are those sort of things? Maybe new church buildings or missions or rallies or Bibles. You know, shouldn't that be where our money goes? Is there any point in spending money on good things just for the sake of doing good things? Well, I think the story of Jesus' life shows us that doing good things, things that are right and just, things that build people up and grow and nurture healthy communities and relationships, that is never, you put your money into those things, that is never putting money into doing good things just for the sake of doing good things. Not when you do that as a Jesus follower. It's for the sake of our good and loving God, who wants the whole world to know that he loves them beyond measure, and he is moving all of human history to a point of restoration where we will live in perfectly good community. Do good things with your money. Use your money power for good. And the third one, God's children are not tight-fisted. You more commonly hear that talk about along the lines of be generous. But I figure you've heard that many times. I thought I'll try a different way of getting that message in. I read a blog this week written by a young mum called Megan Westra, an American lady, and she said she was a church kid among church kids, and she'd been tithing since elementary school. That's like primary school, I think. So she'd been taught to tithe. She talked about, once it was 50 cents. And then when she was a young adult and she went to college, she was giving 10% of her income quite faithfully. And then she said she started listening to some podcasts and reading some work of some guys that would be considered more liberal theologians, people like Rod Sider and Gustavo Gutierrez and Shane Claiborne. And she started wondering, and I'll quote her here, she started wondering, was God being honoured in the way I breezed past the woman experiencing homelessness on the street on my way to buy a $6 cup of coffee? America, $6 coffee. And she said the questions began to prick in my heart and mind, and I switched to fair trade coffee. After all, if I was going to spend $6 on a double shot vanilla latte with extra foam, the person growing the coffee beans should get a livable wage. I didn't stop there. Her daughter was born, and Megan writes, as we expected, the people from our church gathered around to support our family with casseroles and baby clothes. But Megan and her husband, as part of this journey, had actually deliberately moved into a low-income area to live and work there as part of their trying to figure out about their relationship with money. So, the church helped them, that was expected. But she says, unexpectedly, our neighbours from this low-income community, who often scarcely made ends meet, they showed up on our doorstep with gifts and food to welcome the newest baby to the neighbourhood. She said, I was stunned. How did my neighbours who had so little find the means to be so generous? I started to think of their generosity, she wrote, whenever I would rush past someone in need on my way to get coffee or to pick up a new top for an event. How was it that I never seemed to have the resources to be generous? She wondered. Megan says that after that experience of their low-income neighbours being so generous to welcome their new baby, she and her husband changed up the way they had their money conversations. They stopped having so are we going to make our tithe on our take-home or our gross pay conversation? Which is less, let's do that one. And they started having a money conversation around this sort of question, God, what would you like us to do with our resources? And then I was struck by these words at the end of her blog. She said, now we choose to view the money and resources we have not as ours, but as ours to steward. And this bit, it also means that when we are in need, so when Megan and her husband and her family are in need, we are going to be vulnerable enough to let others know and to trust God, that God will provide somehow. And she said, often that act of expressing my need is harder than to sacrificially give. I think she's right about that. But I think she's onto something there bigger than that. Here's what I think she's onto. Maybe I will have less reason to be tight-fisted with what I do have if I can be sure that if I ever get myself in a situation of need, you'll help me. Put your money where your trust is. Use your money power for good. And repeat after me. God's children are not tight-fisted. Paul told Timothy to tell his people, the people that he pastored, that if they lived like this, then they would be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, so that they may experience true life. And I want to say today, it does not matter what dollar number you have against your name. It might be a very big and impressive number, or it might be a very small and slightly depressing number. It doesn't matter as far as the message of this passage. Bishop Tom Wright talks about Jesus' followers as artists in training. And he says this, he says, we must each carve our own statue from the block of marble we have been given, not from the block of marble that belongs to the person next door. I love that image. What about if we do that as individuals, as families? What about if we do that as a church? Carve something beautiful from the block of marble we have been given as LBC. Because we trust God. Because we want to do what is good with our money. And because we know that as God cares for us in this moment, he will care for us in whatever unforeseen moments lay ahead. Let's carve something beautiful from our own block of marble as individuals and family and as a church. And you know why? Because the love of our good God has always been and will always be our sure inheritance.